What's
We're
up?
going live
Welcome.
now.
Yeah, we are live. The Lettermen Live show with Andy Backstrom, with me, Spencer Holbrook. Another week, Andy, week 10 of the college football season. It is absolutely flying by. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm ready to get down to Piscataway. It's kind of right near where I'm from. I mean, I'm from the Philadelphia area, but we're going right into that region of the Big Ten. So I'm excited about that. Probably going to see the parents. They're coming out to Somerset, which is where we're staying, just for a little meal on the night before the game. And yeah, I've seen Rutgers play before. When I covered Boston College, I went down there for a road trip to nice little stadium they have there, SHI Stadium. And they're usually, they got a good crowd even when the team isn't playing particularly well, but they're bowl eligible, Spencer, for the first time traditionally since 2014. And so Greg Schiano has this program kind of on its way again to being somewhat of a Northeast power.
Yeah, it's interesting because you talk about the crowd, and I'm always it's always promising when you see a crowd at a Rutgers game and it's bigger than what you probably expect. And it's not just Ohio State fans. Like some of the road trips we go on, like the Purdue game, there was a lot of Ohio State fans. So I think it's always encouraging to see Rutgers. And then it's also going to be 65 degrees in Piscataway. So like you expect the crowd to be pretty good. We went over there a couple years ago, 2021 and in 2019, really. And it was 2021 wasn't. 2019 was cold. I mean, just downright cold. And it's nice to have a November game that's going to be in the 60s. Ohio State will certainly take that. They'd rather play a little warm weather football. I'm sure everybody would, but should make for a really great day over there. And I'm excited to get over there. Like you said, a long day of driving ahead of us tomorrow, but it should be fun.
Yeah, they've got a nice tailgating space there, a lot of green area. And honestly, those students will come out for anything. Like if you got a reason to go and root on Rutgers team, like they're going to show out. I know the basketball games, they're always packed in their arena down there. And if they have a reason to go watch the football team, like even when they were not winning, they would still be out there at least for the first half. So it's a big school, and they get up for their sports teams at least when they're winning. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that. So I'm excited for the atmosphere, even if it's a noon kickoff. I actually like this one being at noon. Just a little bit break for everyone after the night game last week in Madison, which was awesome. But yeah, I'm excited for this matchup and a lot of cool little storylines here and there that we'll talk about as the show goes on, and also just I think first and foremost is everyone's watching Kyle McCord in this almost like a bounce back effort and see if he's healthy enough to be at his best this week.
Yeah, a little peek inside Spencer sheet tomorrow on lettermenrow.com. I got a Kyle McCord play in there. I think he's going to have a pretty nice day. A little inside baseball. We love the noon games on the road because we can go back to the hotel and do some work and then have a nice day of driving the next day. Whereas against Wisconsin, get back to the hotel very late, stay up even later and write. And then the next morning you get up and you have to instantly start driving home. And it makes for a long, long Sunday. So I'm happy that this is a noon game. I'm sure Ohio State won't mind getting back into their beds at a reasonable hour after this game on the road. But it's not a typical Rutgers game, Andy, and that's kind of the message that I've been trying to convey to Ohio State fans. I know you have as well, Tim May. Like, it's not the typical Rutgers team. This is a 6-2 club that is playing some good football, that understands the assignment in front of them with Greg Schiano. Like, it's a team that I don't think Ohio State's going to be able to just completely take lightly. Now, I don't think Ohio State's in jeopardy of losing this game, but I also don't think Ohio State's going to walk in there and win by 40 like they're used to against Rutgers.
Yeah, and they don't need to win by 40. They haven't really done that much this year. Outside of the Purdue game, I felt like that was their most complete and typical kind of dominance in Big Ten play that we're kind of accustomed to seeing with this program the last few years, or really, last decade or so. I just think that it's a game where they have a chance to do that. Rutgers is a team that offensively is just okay at this point. Their talent level hasn't necessarily caught up offensively as to their defense. I feel like their defense is a little bit ahead of the game, which can sometimes be the case. It's honestly the case this season for Ohio State. And the Rutgers defense is statistically among the best in the country. I mean, we were just talking about this with the Penn State matchup, right? We're saying Ohio State, Penn State, two of the best defenses in the country. I mean, Rutgers is not at the Penn State level going to that week. week 8 matchup that was between Penn State and Ohio State. But Rutgers is pretty darn close. They're second nationally in pass defense. They're, I believe, 15th or 13th actually in scoring defense. They're only allowing 15.8 points per game. So this defense, I mean, it's not like Rutgers has played no one either. They're 29th in strength of schedule. So it's like they had a win against Virginia Tech early in the season, who's playing well now, by the way. They beat Northwestern to open the season, which isn't as bad as people thought they would be. So they've had some wins. They're 3-2 in Big Ten play, and as you said, like they're not a pushover.
Yeah, they beat Michigan State, who is actually terrible. But they had a huge comeback in the fourth quarter to beat Michigan State. They steamrolled over Indiana. They beat a Virginia Tech team before Virginia Tech knew who Virginia Tech was, with former starter. Now they've got a new starter in there, and Virginia Tech looks better, so that strength of schedule is going up. They beat Northwestern. I think it's worth noting that that was Northwestern in week 1. I mean, fresh off of all of the garbage that Northwestern was dealing with at that time. So you could go and pick your way through why this isn't an impressive run by Rutgers, but you only lose at Wisconsin by 11 in Camp Randall. You only lose by 24 to a Michigan team that may have known every single play that was coming at you. So, I mean, because when they played Michigan, that was a month ago. And so, they were up 7-0 on Michigan, and Michigan was a 1-score game. I think late into the second quarter before Michigan finally started to pull away. So, like, it's a game that can get tricky if you know one thing. Well, if you know two things, Greg Schiano is going to throw the book at you with special teams, and Ohio State is not very good on special teams. And the players are going to play their butts off for Greg Schiano, and that's all you need to know about this team, really.
Yeah, they're a sound team. I think that's the way we've been describing them this week, especially on the defense side of the ball. You're right about special teams. If you're looking for an edge, I mean, that's the edge right now in Ohio State. Like this Ohio State team hasn't allowed a play of 40 or more yards this season. Neither is Rutgers, by the way. But Ohio State almost allowed a 40-yard play on a punt this past week against Wisconsin, and so that's where some of the mistakes are really popping up. We think of the botched snap against Maryland in that game. We think about there was a mixed extra point even against Purdue. It didn't really end up biting them, but that happened as well. And then you think about the punt return against Penn State, as well as the muff punt situation against Penn State. Like there's just every week one thing happens where you're like, okay, check it off the list. Like we knew something was going to happen, and I think they got to get to the point where that doesn't happen. And I always said it in this show, like I'm going to keep talking about it until it doesn't. That's a good point. If you're looking to have an upset win, special teams is a good place to get an edge. And having covered a team that has kind of been in this like mid range where you're trying to make that jump from mediocre to get that first big win, like these games are so huge. Like this fan base, this program will get up for Saturday. And as you said in the beginning of the show, this is not the regular kind of Rutgers week.
Yeah, this isn't your older brother's Rutgers team, is what we're trying to tell everybody at home. It's a team that, again, we'll just keep saying it plays hard. Got our first little comment here. Hearing rumors about McCord's injury, this has me worried. I hope he's okay. I will read a direct quote from Kyle McCord from last night at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. It's not ideal, McCord said. I'm just powering through it, pushing through the pain. The biggest thing is learning how to play with it, and I think it's been getting better every single week. And, just learning how to move on it a little bit and stuff like that. I'll be honest, he has not been 100% since the Notre Dame game. You've seen it at times in his play. You've seen it at times not affect his play whatsoever. He's had the tape on it for a while now. I think if it would be okay to categorize it as a re-aggravation in the win over Wisconsin on that scramble. He did pick up a first down on that play. It showed a lot of grit that he did that because, the ankles already bothered him. He learned how to play on it once. He's going to have to learn how to play on it again this year. I wouldn't expect him to sit out at all. But that's kind of where we start, Andy, is, Kyle McCord and coming off probably his worst performance, very reminiscent of the 2021 CJ Stroud game against Nebraska, where he had a couple picks in that game. The Buckeyes win by 9, but wasn't as good as it should have been. It reminded me a lot of Kyle McCord's game there. So, yeah, I think that you're going to see a Kyle McCord that comes out motivated and angry and ready to prove a lot of people wrong who have said some things about him this week.
Well, let's get the storyline out of the way, too. This is a personal matchup for him. His dad, Derek, played at Rutgers quarterback position. It's actually funny because Greg Schiano said that he was a GA at the time when Derek McCord was a sophomore quarterback there, and he said that he was the box lunch coordinator to Derek. He said he probably made him a sandwich once or twice along the lines there. So that's a cool matchup for Kyle. Of course, he played at St. Joe's Preps in Philadelphia, but he actually grew up in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. So he said that he grew up going to Rutgers games, obviously the tie with his dad there too. So that's cool for him, having family and friends going back. So he's going to get up for that regardless. He's not going to miss a game for this team if there's any way he can play. Like, that's the thing with Kyle McCord and the toughness that I think people need to really realize. Like, the fact that playing through an ankle injury is really difficult, and there seem to be ankle injuries on like every player of this offense right now, the major ones at least. We talk about Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Devin Brown, Kyle McCord. But I mean, he's fighting through it, and you see that against Wisconsin. Like, he was not leaving that game, and he said that yesterday. Like, there was just no point where he was considering leaving the game. I think people in this fan base should really appreciate that. I think that takes a lot of grit. I don't think that would be the case for every quarterback in the country. And I also think that, for a game like this, his offensive line can help him because he's struggled under pressure this year, but he's been really, really darn good when he's had a clean pocket. And so if they can block this Rutgers defensive line and whatever blitzes and stunts that are sent their way, I think that'll be a huge help to Kyle McCord in his ankle.
Yeah, that's the key, is protecting him, right? What's the best way to keep a quarterback healthy is to make sure that he doesn't get hit. And what's the best way to keep an already hobbled quarterback healthy is to make sure that he doesn't get hit. So I'll be honest, I like what I've seen from Josh Simmons the last couple of weeks. I think he's starting to turn a corner in a lot of ways. I think he's getting better. I like what I've seen in spurts from Josh Fryer. I think he's getting more aggressive. That doesn't always help you in pass blocking. This team used to be stronger in the pass blocking. Right now, the last 2 weeks, I would say they've been better in the run blocking than they have the pass blocking, which is just weird. They can't seem to put both of those together. You'd like to think this Rutgers team presents a challenge for them that they can do that. I think Donovan Jackson's starting to play a lot better. You're seeing growth from Carson Hinsman. Didn't have his best week last week, but there's gonna be some built-in nerves for Carson Hinsman as a first-year starter on the road in that environment. Oh, by the way, in his home state, we were actually walking into the stadium last week at Camp Randall, and there were like 35 Hinsman 75 jerseys around us. And it was like, well, we're walking in with Carson Hinsman's family. So hello, Hinsman family. But that had to be nerve-wracking for him. But I think this offensive line is starting to show maybe some of the potential that Ohio State saw in them the first few weeks of the season when they just stuck with them and let them go through those growing pains and got those wins and understood that it wasn't going to look pretty. So I think that's a thing that we need to be watching for with Kyle McCord's injury, with the progression of the offensive line. I think those things all kind of intertwine.
Yeah, I think the offensive line has been fine in pass protection all year. I don't think there's been a point where that's been a huge worry for me. And going into the season, I was worried about that most importantly because a first-year starting quarterback with that kind of pressure, that would be a huge warning sign. And when they have given up sacks or pressures, sometimes it's been on Kyle McCord not getting the ball as quick as he needs to. Sometimes it's not stepping up into the pocket when there's room to do so. Sometimes in the intentional grounding cases, it's again, he can do something. He needs a backup plan. That was the talk this week from Ryan Day. Like, if your first read isn't there and your second read isn't there, you need to have a plan for what to do next. It felt like he didn't always have a plan, or he wasn't on the same page with his receivers. Whatever reason, those intentional groundings can't happen. But that took them out of field goal range. Instead of getting up 2 scores, they were only up 1 score for quite a while in that second half. And that is an emphasis this week. So I think part of it in the pass protection is Kyle McCord. Part of it's the offensive line. That's why it's a little tricky to evaluate how good or average they've been in that regard. The run blocking, we can get into because TreVeyon Henderson, man, talk about difference maker. Like, they talk about it, but you saw it. And what was your takeaway, I guess, from week 1 of TreVeyon Henderson's return?
Yeah, he was phenomenal. I would say he was as advertised. I thought he looked like a 5-star. And that's what you want, right? You want your 5 stars looking like 5 stars because they help lift everything. And there were holes that were not there that TreVeyon Henderson hit, and there were holes that TreVeyon Henderson hit that you and I could have run through, but he just makes it look prettier. The first play of the game, he gets 9 yards, and you say, okay, like that's a pretty good start for him, but you wonder if he can keep it up. I cannot stress enough that the 24th carry of the afternoon was his best carry of the day. That is so impressive to me. A guy who hasn't been on the football field in a month in a game situation, and goes out there and his 24th carry of the ball game when he's kind of taking like he made it look easy in the open field, but like you're playing against Wisconsin, those are not small human beings. Like you're getting that's physical football, and to do that on the 24th carry of the game, the 33-yard touchdown run where he had to kind of weave through a little bit and knife his way into open field. I could not have been more impressed with what he did. And 162 yards on those 24 carries, the touchdown, it's a building block for him. I do not think it's the ceiling for him. And if we saw him have a better game than that in one of these final few, and if we saw him do that against Michigan, nothing would surprise me at this point with him. He's that kind of talent. So I think the sky's the limit for this offense if 32 is in the backfield.
What impressed me was what he said post-game, was the kind of composure he had in saying that, hey, look, I needed to be patient. Last year, I kept trying to get on the field. I wasn't fully healthy. I couldn't wait it out. And at the time in which I needed to be on the field, I couldn't be because at that point it was too far gone and I was too hurt. Well, this year has a cheap shot, as he described it, against Notre Dame. You can go back and watch it. I think it was in the second quarter, early on in that quarter. And he's kind of shoved down after a play. And you can even see him pointing. I don't know what he said, but I imagine it was something to the effect of bad words, and you shouldn't have done that. But justifiably so. It was a cheap shot looking back at that. And it's kind of weird that no one, I mean, we also didn't really see that at the time. There was a lot going on in that game. But I thought it was really great of him to kind of say, I need to be patient. And I was this year. And a lot of noise was out there. And even, everyone was naturally questioning what's going on because there's very little talked about with injuries in the program. And that's just college football in general. There's not much out there about injuries in this sport. So that's kind of standard at this point. And I felt like he did a really good job of just kind of staying in his lane and waiting his turn. And I thought it was really cool how he was very patient on that final run, the touchdown run, in terms of navigating and kind of snaking through, following the blocks of his offensive line, tight end, and wide receivers. And he was very patient in this whole process of waiting for the time to return. And once he did, man, he was that difference maker.
Yeah, because, if they don't have him, I think they probably still could have won that game without him because Marvin Harrison Jr. is special, and I think Chip Cranham's good enough. And I think, if you have to resort to Dallin Hayden, then you do that. But, Travion makes such a difference in the backfield, and he's – 4 catches for 45 yards. We can't ignore that because that takes so much pressure off of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyle McCord when you've got a check down valve like that. Kate Stover's kind of banged up right now. I think, Julian Fleming, we saw him with an injury at some point in the game. He ended up finishing the game, but still something to monitor. Even with Kyle McCord's injury, a check down to the running back is never a bad thing. And when it's a guy who can hit a home run off of that, it's an even better thing. So, he changes the entire dynamic of this offense in the passing game and on the ground.
Yeah, and people have been calling for throwing to running backs more. I mean, like his freshman year, he had 27 catches, but this was his first game with more than 2 receptions since the Utah game, the Rose Bowl, at the end of the 2021 season. So this was something we didn't see last year from any running backs. This was something that people have been calling for since like the J.K. Dobbins days, like using a running back in the passing game. I think it helps a quarterback a lot, especially one that probably isn't 100%. We know isn't 100%. And I think that it's nice to have a safety valve, especially when Kyle McCord has been struggling in times of pressure. And if you don't know where to go to the ball, well, hey, Travion Henderson's right there. I thought it was interesting. Brian Day also mentioned first drive of the game, Kyle McCord gets a low snap, and there was pressure there. And normally, if his eyes were up, he would have seen the pressure. And Travion Henderson was actually right out there for a pass. If he could have caught, there were 2 blockers ahead, could have been explosive. That's the kind of play where it was unfortunate, low snap. It's a Carson Hinsman, Kyle McCord situation, needs to be executed better. But if it was executed correctly and he saw the pressure, hey, number 32 is right there, catch the pass and take it for 15, 20 yards. And I think that's a thing that can help this offensive line. That's a thing that can help Kyle McCord. And I think that just makes him more versatile because you need a complete back. And he seems to be a 3-down back right now.
Andy, do you think there's any truth to the idea that Kyle McCord is better in the second half and later in games because that ankle gets a little loosened up and kind of stops? Because like since that Notre Dame game, his first halves have been just something, man, and his second halves have been so good. I think it stems off of this too. You just said helps Kyle McCord get into a rhythm. a lot can happen for a quarterback if he sees one get to the receiver's hands early and sees a few get to the receiver's hands often. We thought we saw that against Penn State. He starts 5 for 5, then goes 1 for his next 7. But I think there's something to getting him into a rhythm, letting him trust that ankle, but also getting it out quickly and going from there, because you can build a lot off of that. And again, you're going against the number 2 pass defense in the country. This is not your older brother's Rutgers. So I think you've got to get him into a rhythm early, and that could all start with TreVeyon Henderson out of the backfield.
Yeah, I think the most concerning thing is that, like, you ask any offensive play caller or coach at any level, and they script out those first 10, 12 plays. So, like, you want to be hitting your P's and Q's and be on all cylinders for those plays. And the fact that they've been so just Jekyll and Hyde, starting with him, number 6, Kyle McCord at the quarterback position, that's concerning, especially because, like, yes, you can afford it with the defense that they're playing right now, especially on third down, getting those 3 and outs and really controlling the clock the last few weeks. I mean, it's insane how much they've skyrocketed in the time of possession leaderboard the last few weeks, but they need to be better to start faster. I mean, at a certain point, you got to get out of this habit of being like, we'll catch up and we'll be good, because, we've seen it over the years in this sport, whether it's Ohio State or other teams. Sometimes it's too much to come back from, and games can get away. I mean, last year against Michigan, that game got away from them. At a certain point, there was just too much to come back from. So I think this is a great week to try to break that streak. I think that having a strong first half, even if it means maybe a little bit of a letdown in the second half, like the Purdue game, I felt like was their best in terms of starting fast. And yeah, they kind of dovetailed in the second half. That was also because they were playing a bunch of bench players. Like, they need to have a Purdue effort against Rutgers this week, I think.
Yeah, and then you can, because you can stack those. If you have a Purdue effort against Rutgers, you can have a Rutgers effort against Michigan State. Then you have a Michigan State effort against Minnesota, and it just stacks. And then you go into the rivalry game and put it all out on the field. So, like, I think this is the perfect time to start that. You have to start ramping up to Michigan, and you don't want to look at Rutgers, Michigan State, and Minnesota as a ramp up. It's a ramp up. It really is. Like, we don't have to fool ourselves. We're not here on the Lettermen Row. Will never lie to its audience. So, like, I don't think these teams are going to beat Ohio State. If I had to put a lot of American currency on it, I would say Ohio State will go into the rivalry game at 11-0. But there's a difference between 11-0 and winning games by 7 to 15, and then going into the rivalry game and you're really starting to roll. You're getting that offensive line going. The defense still looks as dominant. The passing game looks improved. Mecca Ibuka looks healthy. TreVeyon Henderson looks like he's averaging 100 yards a game. Like, there are ways to make 11-0 look a lot prettier, and that all starts this week. I think you've already hit that other benchmark. You hit the Notre Dame benchmark, the Penn State benchmark, the Wisconsin benchmark. Now it's time to ramp up and get to the Michigan benchmark and be playing your best football.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said. I don't know. I think that this is more like a myth or theory, but when you have a backup quarterback come in and everyone's like, well, the defense is going to have to play harder. And sometimes you get like your best defensive efforts in those situations. It's almost like, I think this Ohio State defense is elite regardless of how well this offense is playing. And we've seen that at times this year. The Purdue game is one mention. But it's almost like because they know they have to be better than in years past because this offense isn't scoring 40 plus, they are that much better. And I'm not saying they'll get complacent Ohio State scores in the 40s, but like sometimes it can be a good thing for your defense if they know, hey, we can't allow stuff to happen. Like, we don't have wiggle room. Whereas last year, I thought, they just weren't as good in the first year of Jim Knowles' defense for sure. But also, you had C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr. and a healthy Emeka Ibuka lighting up the scoreboard every single week, scoring 40, 50 points. And if that's the case, it's kind of harder to have that much of a sense of urgency.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I agree with that. So we do it every week, Andy. Keys of the game, Ohio State Rutgers. I will let you start as customary. Let the man on the other side of the screen, Andy Backstrom, start us off. Andy, your first key to the game, Ohio State versus Rutgers. It can be for Ohio State. I really don't think it'll be for Rutgers. But if you would like to go with Rutgers, go ahead. But Ohio State keys to the game.
Yeah, number one is limit Gavin Wimsatt, the quarterback for Rutgers. I think he's the most dynamic quarterback they faced this year in terms of the rushing game. He has, his last time out, 143 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns against Indiana. The last of those touchdowns was 80 yards, took it on his own read, faked the handoff, got to the edge, cut back inside, making the safety miss on the play. And from that point, it was just a foot race. This is a guy who is a 4-star quarterback, one of the more highly rated quarterbacks to get to Rutgers in recent memory. He reclassified, early enrolled. He's been there now. This is his 3rd season. And he's healthy this year. He's improved this year. He's not a great thrower of the football just yet. I think he's got potential to be next season or maybe later this season. But right now, he is a dual threat and someone that is probably more dangerous running the ball than passing it. And last week against Wisconsin, they did let up that 29-yard run on a quarterback draw on that first drive of the second half where Wisconsin did score. We remember there was times where Taulia Tagovailoa had his moments in the run game against Ohio State earlier this season. It's just something to watch for. I'm not certain it's going to be a huge problem for this Ohio State defense, but those linebackers need to be on their A game.
I think there's something to be said about the defensive line and the potential for not getting as many sacks or tackles for loss, but not rushing as hard this week and just keeping him in front of you. You know that this team can't pass. And that you're not saying that they can't pass. They can technically pass, but like they are bad at passing the football. And so I think there's a possibility you see Ohio State kind of lay back a little bit as far as with the defensive line, not go as hard, make sure you're more gap sound than even you usually are, because if you keep Gavin Wimsatt in the pocket and make him beat you with his arm, he will not beat you with his arm. And if he does, then you're like, okay, we just got beat by Rutgers by the quarterback who can't throw the ball, and he threw the ball on us. Like that, you basically live with that. And so I think there's a possibility that you could see this Ohio State defensive line not be as aggressive this week and keep Gavin Wimsatt in front of them, make sure to help those linebackers out and just keep him in the pocket. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, like you got to play against the strengths of this team. Like you can't allow him to beat you with his legs. I kind of agree with that mindset. I mean, I think he can make some throws. Last year against Michigan State, he threw for 236 yards, 2 touchdowns, completed close to 60% of his passes. I know he's only completing half his passes right now. And again, he is not the best passer this team has faced. He's actually probably one of the worst. But it's not like they're playing Army or Service Academy where they're just – I mean, I know actually Army's throwing the football a little bit more this year. But they're not playing that standard, like they're just going to run. It's not a triple option attack. He can do both. And so I think that's what makes it difficult. That's why that red zone package with Devin Brown that they pulled out was so effective, or can be so effective for this team. Like when you've got an actual threat to throw and run, I think that is something that can be quite difficult for defenses, because when they do run the football, you're equating numbers. And we've seen that at times be difficult for every team across the country. But last year it was kind of difficult for Ohio State to contain at times. I remember in that Michigan game, J.J. McCarthy had a couple good runs, including a touchdown run in that game. So this is something that is constantly an issue for defenses across the country. But I agree with you. If you're going to play Gavin Wimsatt, try to contain and limit what he can do and be okay with probably not getting a sack or 2 this week.
My key to the game is RTDB. Run the dang ball. Run the dang ball. Okay, I know Rutgers is good against the pass. They're good against the pass. You can throw it to Marvin Harrison Jr. 15 times and still establish the run. And this team wants to run the football. It's not very good at running the football, but it's improving. And I think that's the biggest thing. It is improving. It is proving to itself that it can run the ball. And in that case, it is proving to opponents that they need to be afraid of it running the ball. If you can get 162 yards from Trevion Henderson on the ground, there's no reason you can't go out and run for a lot of yards against Rutgers. And I believe Rutgers is without one of their starting linebackers for the rest of the season, I think. If that's not true.
I don't know. I know he's out. I don't know if it's season ending.
Yeah, but he's out. And so the box has already changed because one of the best defenders on the roster is not in the game. And so go run the ball. Do what you've been doing. Since they simplified this rushing scheme, Justin Fry talked about it right after Maryland. Yeah, we have to simplify things. We have to get down to what these guys are comfortable doing. We have to have good dialogue with them. It's working. It looks better. It looks cleaner. Even against Penn State, when they only had 79 yards as a team, it looked cleaner. And that is a big deal. You're seeing some creativity in the run game. The fake orbit, and then the counter to Travion was just beautiful. Run the ball. That's the key to the game. If you can run the ball, you're going to be really, really successful against this Rutgers team.
Yeah, just checked, by the way. The player you're referencing is Tyrone Powell. He is out for the year. It was a hand injury. So knew they wouldn't have him this week. But yes, he's out for the entire season the rest of the way. They actually have 3 really good linebackers, and Deion Jennings and Mo Torre are the other two that stick out. And I think, mentioning this week, it was talked about among the coaching staff, like those linebackers are players they're keying in on in terms of this matchup. And I think that's something like, I think Tony Alford even talked about it today on 97.1 The Fan about, running backs this week and kind of the game plan. And that's going to be key, as you mentioned. So that's something to watch out for. Kind of going more on this, I guess I'll go to my next key to the game, right? I would say that continue to target Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think that at this point, he's had 4 games in a row with 10 or more targets. And you got to keep that streak going. If anything, you got to dip more into the 12-plus category. And that doesn't mean that they should have the same target share as they had last week. It's difficult because, you can't have everything, right? Last week, they threw to Trivion Henderson 5 times. He actually dropped a touchdown, could have had 5 catches. They also threw to Chip Trainum a few times. He had a key 3rd down conversion on one of those drives. But they didn't throw to Cade Stover once. G. Scott had 2 targets. The wide receivers total had 4 targets outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. So, yes, I know kind of picky with how you want to spread those out. It's a game. You got to let it play out. One thing you can control, though, is getting the ball to 18. And that is the key this year. I think it's really dumb when people just say, oh, well, if they didn't have Marvin Harrison Jr., then, would they be winning this many games? Well, they do have Marvin Harrison Jr., and they better use every bit of him for as long as they have him, because guess what? He's going to the NFL pretty darn soon, and he's going to be a top 3 pick, probably the first one since Calvin Johnson Jr. in 2007. So I say use him as much as you can. And it's quite interesting looking at these teams because, they're coming up against some good corners. Last week, they faced Ricardo Hallman, who made that great play on the ball that had the 2nd interception of Kyle McCord. Week before that, Kalen King, he's a pretty good corner. Of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. got the best of him ultimately in that matchup. But there's ways to move him around. This week, they got Robert Longerbeam from Rutgers, who's actually quite a good corner. He's been targeted the most on the team, but he has not given up many receptions. I believe he's only, 15 receptions on 39 targets. That's a sub 40% reception percentage. So that's a name to know. But the good thing about Marvin Harrison Jr. is you can move him around wherever you want. So he's not going to stay on one corner the entire game. And even if it is Robert Longerbeam, I'm still taking Marvin Harrison Jr. every single time.
I think if it was Darius Slay, I'd take Marvin Harrison Jr. at this point. You just throw any corner out there. I don't know, man. I'm not going against Marv. That brings me to my key, Andy. What's 18 plus 2? 20. 20 targets. Man, wow. You know. 20 targets for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. There's no reason not to. You just said it. Throw Marvin the ball, and in that case, get Emeka the ball too. If Emeka's back, that means he's healthy because they're not rushing guys back like they did last year. And if he's healthy, that means you can give him the ball. He should have plenty of touches. They need to I think, in my opinion, this is just one man's humble opinion in an office in the greater Columbus area. Do what you've done with Xavier Johnson on those jet sweeps, on those orbit motions, and just try him with Emeka, because I think Xavier Johnson's a great player, but I think Emeka's more athletic, and I think Emeka does a little bit more for you. So any way you can get the ball to number 2, do it. Any way you can get the ball to number 18, do it. But make sure that everyone knows that 2 is back. Just because you have 18, and you just talked about it, and you don't have to decrease his production, but make sure everyone knows that 2 is just as good, and Emeka Egbuka can get open, just as often from the slot as Marvin Harrison Jr. can get open from the outside. So maybe my bigger point is just ball distribution, because now I've said run the ball, get the ball to Emeka, and you just said get the ball to Marvin. So maybe we're just talking about being a more diverse offense, and we can just lump that all into one key to the game overall. But yeah, it's pretty important that you start to spread this thing around.
Yeah, start to spread it around a little bit. I mean, again, you can only control so much. We both asked about that this week in the press conference to Ryan Day, and he said, sometimes the plays are designed to certain players, they just don't get there. Like the touchdown that should have been to Cade Stover, or at least that was the idea. It was supposed to be a passing route to the tight end, and he was covered, and then Kyle McCord rolls out and throws the interception, which he tried to fit into Carnell Tape, which he said was a dumb decision. So, like, that play was actually built for the tight end. So, like, sometimes, like, they're designing it for these players. It's just not working out that way, and that's something that I think is always good to remind ourselves of. But I agree with you. Emeka Egbuka is someone that I think you're right. Like, if they're playing him, he's got to be ready at this point because they've held him out when he probably could have played. He was technically available, which I think is something that's kind of getting forgotten about. Like, he could have played at Penn State. Like, he actually worked his way back to that game. Clearly wasn't 100%. They didn't play him. That was definitely the right decision. The next week against Wisconsin, we saw him warming up. He looked pretty darn good, but it felt like they still weren't quite ready to play him. So if he plays on Saturday, I'm with you. I think he's fully healthy. I'd love to see him in that role. And I also think he'd be more versatile than Xavier Johnson because when they're using Xavier Johnson, I love what they're doing with that in the run game, perimeter wise. But he hasn't been catching passes. Like, they're not making it two dimensional. It feels still one dimensional. Like, he's going to get the ball in the run game. So I agree with that. I guess my next key of the game, again, I'm not trying to belabor or beat a dead horse, but like special teams. And we talked about it in the open, but like this needs to be a game where you don't miss kick, you don't have a block punt, you don't have a situation where you give Rutgers anything to get life on. And I think especially early on in the game, we might see something weird. If people remember this game last year featured a quasi fake punt with Jesse Mirko. He kind of rolls. Well, yeah, I mean, he rolls off to the edge because that's Australian punting, right? And then, but they teach you that if it's open and the edge, you take it. He took it, and then of course there was a little bit of a skirmish there on the sideline, and I think that like Greg Schiano was asked about it this week. He said, "Look, we had no problem with the punt. The problem was they were concerned about the safety of their player." Kind of just like huddled around by Ohio State players after that. It wouldn't surprise me if we see a real fake punt by Rutgers, and especially early on in this game, I think that you're going to see some wrinkles in the special teams unit, as you said, just cannot stop shooting itself in the foot. They can't do that this week. They can't allow it, especially early on.
You have a full-time special teams coach. Act accordingly. What else do you need to say? Like be disciplined on special teams. Be good on special teams. We only talk about this again. Lettermen Row does not lie to the people. We say the opinion, some opinions. We say some facts. There's some analysis. That's somewhere between those two. You have a full-time special teams coach. The special teams have not looked like it this year. The special teams must be better. And against this team, remember 2020, Ohio State fans, when Rutgers played at Ohio State and Rutgers decided to run every trick play that has ever been developed by any football mind ever. And a lot of them came on special teams. And Ohio State won that game by the smallest margin they've ever won against Rutgers, 22 points. This Rutgers team is better than that Rutgers team. And if you let them do all the special teams trickeration against the undisciplined special teams unit, you're going to have issues. So special teams, be better. My final key to the game, Andy, is defense, act like it. You are one of the best defenses in the country. Defense travels. This defense has been so good. Keep proving it. You have not proven anything yet because you still haven't gotten to the Michigan game. Everything now builds to the Michigan game, especially for this defense. So, little teaser for your bold prediction. If the defense acts like it, they're not going to have an issue with this team at all, because Rutgers isn't going to be able to move the ball, and then Ohio State's going to get more chances to score, and then they'll be able to score more. So defense, this is just another test. It's not the hardest test. It might be one of the bottom 3 tests, but it's still a test. So defense, act like a top 5 defense, and you'll get top 5 defense results.
Yeah, third down right now defensively has been lights out for Ohio State. The last 3 teams they faced are combined 10 of 49 on third down, which is just like, it's such a hack to the game. I mean, that helps your offense big time because you're stealing possessions. That's the way coaches say it. And really, the time of possession, like Ohio State's controlling the clock right now. Rutgers likes to control the clock. They want to stay on the field. They want to run the football. This is the second best rushing offense in the Big Ten. Kyle Munningai is up there among the best running backs right now in the Big Ten. It doesn't get talked about with Braylon Allen's, the Katron Allens, the whole Nick Singleton, the Donovan Edwards, the Blake Corum. You can go on the list, right? But no one talks about Kyle Monangai, and he's up there right now. And so this is a team at Rutgers that's going to try to slow things down, like we saw earlier in the season, right? It's a classic blueprint. How do you beat Ohio State? Well, you shave off possessions. If this Ohio State defense can still play as well as it has been playing on third down and give this Ohio State offense 12, 13 possessions, there's no way this game is close.
I completely agree. And that's why I don't think this game is going to be close. I think this is the game, and I wanted to get your perspective on this. Maybe we can put like percentage odds on it. Just like, what are the odds? What percent do you give it that we look back on this Rutgers game as like the turning point for Ohio State? Because like we've been waiting for it, and maybe it won't come. Maybe there's no turning point this season, and they just continue to just kind of not drag along because they're winning games convincingly. They just got won by double digits at Wisconsin for the first time since 2000. It's not like they're playing poorly, but we're waiting on that moment where like everything comes together. Like if there's a percentage odds that everything comes together this week on the road at Rutgers before these next couple duds, and then you go to Michigan, what is the percentage that this is the game?
Like 75%. I think there's every. Yeah, I think there's everything in line for it to be that. I believe the turning point already happened. I believe the turning point happened against Notre Dame, and I don't. Obviously, this offense isn't where it needs to be or where it could be, but I think that the biggest storyline of this season is the defense, and I think that the reason why they're number one in the country right now in the CFP rankings is the defense. And I think the turning point came when JT Tuimoloau had back-to-back stops to give this offense one last chance against Notre Dame after giving up back-to-back marathon drives in that second half to Notre Dame. And what a better time to kind of show, hey, we're not going to cave in like last year's defense. So to me, that's the turning point of this season so far. Offensively, yeah, maybe this is a turning point. I don't know. We'll see.
I would say I even think you're a little more optimistic than I am, because I was expecting you to say something like 60 to 65%. But the fact that it's greater than 50 tells me something. Like you're starting to feel it. Like Mike Hall talked about a little bit. He played his best game. He's coming out of a little bit of his own personal slump. And I don't know how a defensive lineman gets in a slump, but the team as a team against Maryland, they just didn't look right. And then they looked right against Purdue, but Purdue's really bad. Like, let's just be honest. Like, Purdue's not good. And then they look decent for stretches against Wisconsin, but it still looks way too chunky to me to be smooth. So, like, you're just waiting on everything to smooth out, and you get the sense that it might just be coming soon. And I don't know if I will believe it if it happens against Michigan State, because I think Michigan State has kind of packed it in. But if it happens against a Greg Schiano Rutgers team that's playing its butts off for Greg Schiano and is 6-2 this year, then maybe I'll be like, yeah, I could look back on this and it could be the turning point.
Yeah, but maybe there is no offensive turning point, and maybe there doesn't need to be.
Yep.
And maybe they win a national title because this defense is one of the best defenses in Ohio State history. I'm not saying they are right now. We don't know. We won't know until they play Michigan. We won't know until they play in the Big Ten championship potentially, or they play in the college football playoff. That would only be able to be said if they win the national championship. So I'm not saying that right now. I'm just saying that there is a way you can win a national title without the best offense ever, or even an offense that people are used to seeing here at Ohio State. So we all will keep waiting on this turning point. I will, you will, every fan will, everyone that covers this team nationally. People have been kind of using it as their measuring stick, which I think is incorrect, but that will continue to happen. And it might never happen, but that doesn't mean this team won't accomplish all of its goals.
Yeah, I think, this defense could get to the Big Ten championship game and have you and I out there and might be able to get the job done against whatever the Big Ten West is going to throw at them. But all right, last segments of this show. I did not tell you I was going to do this, but I want to do this every week moving forward, because the people care about it. They really do. Everything 364 days a year builds to one day, and you know what day it is. This year it's November 25th. Next year it's going to be November 30th. Everything builds to that moment. So I kind of want to do not a check-in on Michigan, but just like how you're feeling about Ohio State as it pertains to Michigan before we go to Rutgers, and then we'll do it before Michigan State. We'll do it before Minnesota, and of course, we got to figure out a schedule to do it before Michigan because Thursday night is on Thanksgiving. I'll be food combing up. I'm not going to be talking to you on a YouTube video, but I'd like to do like a little bit of a almost like a heat check on like how you're feeling about Ohio State as pertains to Michigan right now.
Yeah, I like that. I think that what concerns me right now about Ohio State, again, I always believe that this game is about more about Ohio State than it's about Michigan. And so, where is Ohio State at in terms of its own issues that it needs to fix? And I think that the big thing for me are the small things, special teams. Again, I'm not going to go into it again, but like I think that there's a possibility this game in Ann Arbor is 13-10, 16-13, 20-17. And if you're in that situation, how confident are you in Jaden Fielding's leg? We've heard great things, but his longest attempt this year was 45 yards. He missed it against Penn State. We have not seen him make anything further than, I believe, 41 yards. Is that going to be tested before then? Are you going to get all this figured out with punt return and kick return defense? Are you going to get all that figured out? That's one thing that's on my mind. Secondly, this offensive line needs to continue to take steps forward. I think that you're going to need some kind of balance. And if you get out of whack and have a slow start against Michigan, they've been blowing everyone out. You can't afford a slow start against Michigan. So any kind of first half slump can't be had in Ann Arbor, in my opinion.
I like those. The special teams one we're going to keep harping on just because it's something that has been a storyline all year. But the offensive line, yeah, they're growing and they're gaining confidence. I could sense some confidence in Donovan Jackson's voice when I talked to him on Wednesday night. It was a story that I would have liked to have written, but sometimes you just don't get to them in the week of a game week. But they're quotes that I could probably come back to at some point here in the next couple of weeks and stack onto and write a good story about how this offensive line is progressing. I think they are. If there's one group I'm confident that is starting to turn a corner, I think it's the offensive line. They look like they're getting better. And I caution myself when saying that because we've seen at times them look better and then the next week go in and look bad. They handled their business against Notre Dame relatively well and then looked bad against Maryland off the bye week. But there's something to be said about gaining confidence with this offensive line. So that's a great point. One of the things that's on my mind as it pertains to Ohio State, Michigan right now is Ohio State is 16th against the run right now. I don't think Ohio State is bad against the run, but Braylon Allen had 50 yards in the first half before he got hurt. Wisconsin, I think he probably wouldn't have been over that 72.5 total that FanDuel had set on him. I think he would have had a pretty decent game. And it might be a different game if Braylon Allen's in there and Wisconsin can kind of control the tempo of the game rather than relying on a new starter's arm. Devin Mockabee, I believe, had 100 yards. A lot of that came in the second half when it was kind of a wash. But I do think that he found some success there, and Purdue was able to scheme Ohio State out of some gaps a little bit. Audric Estime didn't have a great game, but Notre Dame did find success on the ground and then inexplicably went away from it. Ohio State has built that 16th ranked run defense against some relatively bad rushing units. And if there's one thing that I do question about this Ohio State defense, it's probably against the run. And I know they looked good against Penn State, but I may not believe it until I see it against Michigan. So I still just have it in the back of my head, like Hassan Haskins, 5 touchdowns, Donovan Edwards, 2 long touchdowns with no Blake Corum even in the lineup, and they're still running for 250 on Ohio State. Like that's one thing that like I'll have to see to believe with this Ohio State run defense against Michigan. It's one of my things that I'm kind of thinking about right now.
Yeah, it's a good point because, like, when you look at the names of the schools they faced so far, you're like, well, hey, they stopped Notre Dame and they stopped Penn State and they stopped Wisconsin, which traditionally, like, those are all 3 really good rushing offenses. Well, they're all 43 or worse in terms of ranking right now in rushing offense. So that's a good point because, like, it might get glossed over. Like, hey, those are all great running backs, normally good rushing teams, but yeah, not as much this year. So yeah, in a way, untested. But I do think that this defense, as much as we kind of wait and wait and wait to kind of like decide how good they are, every week they travel, they deliver, and you know, I don't know. This is just kind of a tangential take, but like I think it actually helps this team that they have to go on the road for 6 games this year. I think that's a big part of this team. I know they talk about road warriors. This is a second straight road trip for them going up to Rutgers or down to Rutgers, I guess I should say.
Over.
But over whatever. The point is, this team, I the defense is traveling, the mindset is traveling, and I think that a lot of players have talked about being villains on the road, kind of taking in the atmosphere. They don't always get that at Ohio State. I mean, next year they play 8 games at home, 4 on the road. There's not too many menacing atmospheres next year. I mean, they play at Oregon. Yeah, it's tough. They play at Penn State. Yes, that's tough. But otherwise, like this is a unique season. They're going to Notre Dame. They go to Wisconsin. They have a trip to Ann Arbor, potentially going to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship and then the college football playoff. I think there's something to be said about a team that has to travel, that has to play good defense, and that has to clutch out, for lack of a better term, wins. And I think that builds a team for a game like the one that's going to be played on November 25th more than anything else.
Yeah, that's a really, really good thought. And I think that's a, a great, like, we still have to see it in Ann Arbor, but we've seen it there. We've seen it elsewhere. We saw it in Madison. We saw it in South Bend. Like Kyle McCord standing on that bench on the visitor side and yelling into the crowd. Like that was a defining moment of not only Kyle McCord's career, but this season. And he's still going to have chances for more defining moments. You know, that was a huge moment for a guy like Chip Trayanum. But it like you can't tell the story of the season without that. But right now, like the story of October is almost as crazy as the story of September. So like this season has been like not a storybook. I don't want to call it that because Ohio State hasn't won anything yet. They've won 8 games, but nobody cares if you win 8. Like everyone cares. You know the old saying: "Go 1-11, beat Michigan, you're okay." So like you have to beat Michigan. The other thing that I'm just keeping an eye on, just maybe we could each just give 2 a week. The other thing I'm keeping an eye on right now is coaching. Last year, I thought the coaching was just way too tight against Michigan. The Buckeyes have just felt like a more loose coaching staff this year. They seem like they're just, enjoying it, not enjoying it, but they just don't seem as uptight. Last year, when you come off that first loss to Michigan under Ryan Day, all of those guys losing to Michigan for the first time, it just felt like everybody was tight with the goal of like, oh, we got to get to Michigan, we got to get to Michigan, we got to get there. And then you get there and you're so tight that you can't perform at your best. And maybe you had some help from some factors that were out of your control. But you still just seemed way too tight. And I don't think they're coaching that way right now. I don't think Ryan Day felt that way going into Notre Dame. I don't think he felt that way going into Penn State. And I think for the first time, Ryan Day truly embraced being on the road when he was in Madison. Like he was talking about the crowd and the atmosphere and how awesome it was. And like even he is becoming that road warrior. So like it kind of goes a little bit with what you're talking about with the road warrior thing, but like they're just not coaching as tight this year. And I think it shows. And I think you're seeing the defense play loose. You're seeing, Marvin Harrison Jr. just be able to go out there and ball. So like, I think there's also something to be said about the coaching that I'm continuing to watch for, of just like not getting too tight, knowing that you've lost 2 straight to Michigan.
Yeah, I think that a lot of those things are super good to key in on. Like, they also open the season on the road in Big Ten play at Indiana. Like, I don't know, not to harp on it too much, but I like the way the schedule has progressed. I like the way that it's challenged Ohio State along the way to prepare them for that game against Michigan. The other thing, to your point about Ryan Day, just the coaching staff and the mindset of being more loose, like after that Georgia game, it was kind of like that was the standard, the expectation. Even though they lost that game, there was a lot to like about the way Ryan Day coached that game. It's felt like he's brought that energy to every single game this season. I mean, everyone by now has seen the video of him jumping up and down, animated, to get the referees to say, hey, like the play clock wasn't reset. That's why it was a delay of game. Like that's the kind of energy. Every time we see him in the post game press conference, he is out of breath. And that's because he has basically gone through a full like Orange Theory level workout. Like he's just put himself through the ringer, physically, emotionally. And I think that you can't expect anyone else to do any better than that in terms of effort. I mean, again, like that's just what you're looking for. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen on November 25th. Like he's got to bring it then as well, and that's still yet to be seen.
My assumption is he will, as you say, bring it November 25th. I think he's going to be pretty amped up for that one on the road with his big gray and black Ohio State coat on. That coat that he was wearing against Wisconsin was sweet, by the way. I will say that. Like, props to Ryan Day. That coat was awesome. You know what else is awesome? The Week 10 college football slate. This weekend is a banger. Went 3-2 last week. I won't complain about a winning week. We can be better, though, and we will be better because we have 5 plays. 5. You got a game that you're watching before I get into it?
You got to stack up like a graphic of like your record compared to like Stanford Steve, compared to the Bear. Like every week, you got to just have a graphic up here so we can keep track.
Yeah, I'll just start calling it Corso too.
Game I'm watching this week. I like Kansas State, Texas. Kansas State's in the rankings now. Texas still without Quinn Ewers. I thought that Malik Murphy was up and down last week. Wonder if they stay at 1 loss. People are still picking Texas in the CFP. That would obviously change if they lose a game to Kansas State. So that's one that I'm watching. Clemson, Notre Dame, after the Dabo week that we had with Tyler from Spartanburg. A lot of people went as him for Halloween. That's a game I'm watching. Just, I don't know. Maybe Clemson randomly wins. Who knows? And that sounds so weird to say. This should be a game that you kind of circle like, oh, I don't know. It's a toss-up, but they're definitely the underdog in that one. So that's another one I'm watching. And I guess Missouri, Georgia, right? I mean, we'll see if this Missouri team is actually as good as number 12 and if this Georgia team is as good as number 2. Like, I think it's a pretty good barometer. Like, is Georgia just going to blow them out and prove that they are pretty dang good again and that they are a threat to win the national title for 3rd year in a row? Or is Missouri going to actually make a game of it and make us continue to question if Georgia is actually that good?
So you only touched on one game that I have a pick on, which is good because then we can, go through it and see what happens with your games and then with my games. We're taking, get to the book now. You got 3 minutes. Texas Tech -2 against TCU. TCU stinks. Texas Tech also stinks, but I think Texas Tech at home gets the win there by at least 2.5. I actually do have some American currency on that game. Georgia Tech money line against Virginia. Virginia stinks. They shouldn't be favored in any game ever. I know that they've beaten North Carolina and Miami, but Georgia Tech is on a bowl game mission and Virginia is not. So give me the Jackets on the road at Virginia. We're taking BC on the road +2.5 against Syracuse. For the boy, Andy Backstrom over there, we are not messing around anymore. BC 9-3. 9-3 BC. That's right. You heard it here first. Syracuse stinks. So we're taking Boston College +2.5. 2 more plays. Arizona +3. Arizona is good. Okay, Arizona is going to beat UCLA just like Arizona beat Oregon State last week. Arizona +3. And then the game of all games, don't put the mortgage on it. Don't be irresponsible. If you have a problem, get the hotline and call it. Kansas State +4.5 against Texas. It's going to happen. Down goes Texas. Get them out of the playoff. They're not good enough. And then Oklahoma's going to get beat again, and the Big 12 will miss the playoff. So those are the 5. The game that I'm definitely watching, though, is Alabama and LSU. It is one of my favorite games every year. I'm a sucker for it. I don't know why. We always act like it's the game of the century. I don't care. You get those helmets on the field. You get those crowds against each other. That is wonderful television. So I love watching Alabama LSU. I'll be streaming the second half while I'm working in the press box at Rutgers, I promise, because I won't be able to watch the first half. I really like this matchup. I think it's going to be a banger because Alabama plays great defense and doesn't do a lot offensively. LSU plays great offense and does absolutely nothing defensively. It should be fun, to say the least. If Alabama blows them out, I will not be surprised, but it should be fun more often than not. So that's something I'm watching for.
What do you like better, the Alabama-Auburn game or the Alabama-LSU game? Because, for me, it's definitely Alabama-Auburn.
Yeah, the Iron Bowl is a treat, man, because I grew up watching Ohio State, Michigan at a family Thanksgiving, and then you flip the TV over, and instantly the Iron Bowl is on. So like you're watching Ohio State, your family's going nuts because Ohio State beat Michigan again, and then all of a sudden the Iron Bowl's on, and anything was happening in that game. You know, you had the Cam Newton year, you had the Saban years, you had the kick six year. So like it just seemed like more happened in that game. So I'm a sucker for the Iron Bowl, and I'm a sucker for Alabama LSU, even though I do not like any of those programs.
Yeah, that's fair enough to me. I'm definitely an Iron Bowl person, so that's why I asked the question. So good answer. Yeah, we gotta get out of here. Got to get on our way to Piscataway tomorrow morning. I'll let you close out.
Hey man, 8 more hours in the car with me, Andy. Are you excited or no?
We know each other very well by now. I'll say that.
Yeah, there we go. We will see you in Piscataway on Saturday for Ohio State and Rutgers, and then we'll see you back in Columbus for the Monday after Ohio State Rutgers on Monday. Before then, go to lettermenrow.com, $1 for 1 month. We'll talk about the pricing after that, but it gets you all the way through that rivalry game up in Ann Arbor. Lettermen Row will be there. You can go to lettermenrow.com, get all the coverage. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you back here next Thursday at 6:30 to break down Ohio State, Michigan State. Until then, we'll see you in Piscataway.